And we post these programs. They're all on the website on OregonCarvers.com under the galleries, video galleries, and they have been around since July of 2 years ago. So they're handy. A lot of people want to attend the program but can't, and so this is a chance that if you're otherwise occupied, you can always go back and look at it. It takes about 2 days to get the program posted back up on the website and for Google to process it. When it's ready to view, I send out an email to those that register along with links and handouts and anything that comes up. And there will be some links that come out of this conversation tonight. And the advantage of registering ahead of time for programs is that you get a tickler 24 hours in advance. So you don't have to hunt around to figure out where that link was. And you get notification of the handouts. So as I said, I'm going to call this meeting, I'm going to call the annual meeting to order. It'll be a short meeting, and then we will do the little bit of business, and then we'll adjourn that meeting or close that meeting and then move on with the program. So you have a board of directors now, and they have agreed to serve again with the addition of Tom Rich as secretary. So the slate that I'm going to ask you to vote on is Larry Wade as president, Roger Crooks as vice president, Tom Rich as secretary, Terry Burnside as webmaster, Diana Larrabee as treasurer, Jim Spitzer as sponsor coordinator, and Tom Sipe as newsletter editor. That's 7 people. We have a board that can have up to 12, and we can have committees beyond that. So your board moves this slate. Is there a second for that slate? Okay, Tom Rich, seconded. Those of you that are out of the area that are not members don't get the vote. So it's a little bit awkward to do this officially, but what we do officially is that I take a picture of your hand. So if you're not a member, or if you're not a member, don't vote. And I got 2 screenfuls, so I need to take 2 pictures. So is there any conversation or questions about the slate? Any other nominations that people would have? I'm going to assume none, but I just want to make sure. Okay. So all those in favor of the slate, please hold your hand up and keep it held up just for a moment. And one more moment, please. I got to take second screen. Okay. Thank you very much. And for those of you that are holding your hands up, but your screen is muted, I have a problem. We have to have a quorum of 20%. So 80 members, we need 16 people. I think we have those votes, but we also have a mechanism to vote by email. So we're all set. You can hold your hands down now. So thank you. It's been anybody against it, I should say. Let me look. Okay, thanks. So welcome to your new board of directors for a year. So the term goes through the end of June. The gathering of Roger, I'm going to ask you just to give the attendance statistics overall. But then I'll make a few comments, and then I'm going to have Ruth, who's the show manager, the carving gallery manager, did a major piece of work, do her take on the debrief. So how was attendance, Roger, at Gathering of the Guilds 2022?
So in 2019, which was our last live show, we had 12,300 attendees. And this year we had 13,300, I think it was, around 700 or 800 more than we had there that time, which is a pleasant surprise. The even more pleasant surprise was some of the vendors said that they sold more in the first day than they sold in 2019, all 3 days. And I think in general, people were pretty happy with their sales. The distribution of the attendance, we had 5,500 the first day, and then we had 4,000, and then the rest on Sunday. And our Sunday this year was bigger than the Sunday last time. I think we're hoping that's because we had a Mother's Day special going on to bring those out. So in general, everyone I've talked to is pretty happy with the attendance and the results of the show.
So the Oregon Potters Association is the mothership, right? They have 50% or so of the booths. What are the other 5 guilds that participate?
So the Potters take 30,000 square feet, which is half of our square footage. And then we have the Weavers, we have glass, we have the beads, we have wood, and we have metals. And metals is mostly jewelry, except for 2 vendors who do large metal sculptures. So those are the 5 guilds that take the other 30,000 square feet.
Okay. And the Oregon Carvers Guilds was part of the woodworking umbrella. And it was the first time that we've been at that show. It's really the first time that this club, which is a new old club, was able to muster the energy to put it together. We had a really large booth. We had 10-foot by 25-foot booth. About 80% of that was a gallery representing 8 different carving artists. And the other was a demonstration area that we used, really staffed continuously to do demonstrations and attract people. We had no idea what to expect. We didn't know what attendance would be. We didn't know what the COVID thing was going to do. A lot of people were masked all the time. So we had that, and it felt safe enough, but there's still, one of these realities. We had the Comfort Birds was a piece of the projects that we did. So we made 80 comfort creatures, most of them birds, but not all. And we sold 46 at the show, and we sold about 8 of them. So we sold about 50 in round numbers. And of that, we made $1,000 out of that. That's all total profit. The other artists sold about $4,000 worth of things. And so we took 15% commission out of that work. And basically we made enough money to cover all of our expenses. And I was really thrilled with that. It was just a huge effort. And we had, I forgot, Ruth probably knows how many volunteers we had, but there was probably 15, 18 volunteers at various stages for setting up and putting this thing together. And it was a day and a half of setup and 3 days of the show and a day and a half of recovery. So I was very lucky to have known Ruth and asked her if she would be the show manager, not knowing exactly what her extraordinary background was and experience. So she jumped in, she was all in. So I've asked her to do that. Ruth, I'm going to spotlight you, and we'll ask you to sort of debrief from your perspective how it went. You're on. There we go.
Hi. Okay. Bear with me because I'm rusty on the whole thing. Screen. There we go. And slideshow. There we are. Can everybody hear me, Larry?
Yes,
okay.
You're fine. Yeah.
So this is just 3 pieces that were in the show, but welcome to Gathering the Guild 2022. We had new infrastructure. These are 3 of the units that that Larry purchased the metal framing for, and Jim Spitzer built the shelving. And then Judy Caldwell was kind enough to sew and donate the curtains that are along the back, which really helped the art pop. And also the shelving covers for her unit, which is on the bottom right. So what you see here are, it's a mixture of different artists coming together. Elise Miller, Masantani, Kelly Stadelman. I'm trying to see Judy's artwork in the bottom right. And then some of Sherry Klein and Putty Atkinson's you can see here. This is our grid wall that Larry purchased. He sent me off to a art show that's been inactive for 43 years. And we took some best known methods from them. This is one of the items that they use. We got it on a little gondola so that we can roll it around. It is modular and movable, so we can add shelves in any area. This is going to be a huge asset to the Carvers Guild for future shows. Alrighty. This the art on this piece is, there's a piece on the left that is Jerry Boone's, I can't remember everybody's name in this, each piece.
That's not
Right.
showing up.
It isn't? My art, my
We're still looking at the grid wall.
oh, okay, hold on. That was the grid wall.
Okay.
All right, this is Jerry Boone's Nanny D fountainhead. Jerry was there all 3 days. He shared history of Nanny D and of carving in general. Nanny D is the fountainhead from the front of the Cuddy Sark. She's absolutely stunning. He made all of the pieces and the stand that she's on, and he also created a book, which he shared as well, and a depiction of a carving cottage, which you'll get to see a little bit later. She was a huge draw. From down every aisle almost, you could see her. She's a witch, so she's a huge draw. Anyway, sorry, I digress. This is Judy's unit. Judy Caldwell invited many of her friends and admirers to come from far and wide. So we had people from all over that came to see her pieces specifically, that stayed and viewed everything else in our booth. All 8 were showstoppers. You can see a little fox on the bottom shelf there. Underneath the snow, there's a teeny tiny mouse. Roger can attest. It was amazing. And Larry too. But having these 2 basically featured artists really drew from afar people into the booth. Once they got there and were able to see the monitor that you can see on the far left-hand side, you can see it big. That's Terry carving on the left, but people could see that from farther away as well. And it gave people an opportunity to kind of see up close. There were lots of individual conversations, but when a small crowd would gather, and it often did, the monitor gave visibility. That little green thing is the camera that's shooting down. And the monitor was at child height, so parents didn't have to lift their children up. They could all stand kind of in the front row, which was awesome for the parents. And then I wish I had taken a picture, or someone would have. There was a moment when Masa Natani, who's on the upper right, sat down on the floor with his book and showed like a 4-year-old all his work. It was just so charming, and all of the people there were really connecting with our carvers. Right next door to them was Jerry Boone's carving cottage that I was talking about earlier. This is a depiction of the original Nanny D being carved in 1869. The lid comes off and there's lighting and you can look down inside it. We didn't let anybody touch this or Nanny D, but it was a peek into Nanny D's history and also the history of our craft. Nanny D and her cottage were like bookends. So one was on one side of the booth and one was on the other. And then our carving demonstrators were like the narrators to the story. They could kind of sit and talk about how they do their process and how it all works. Are there any questions?
Nice job, Ruth.
Oh, thanks. These are our comfort animals. Who knew that would you like to hold a comfort slug would be a great icebreaker? I have to say we've said it many, many times during the 3 days that we were open, but down the hall from our exhibit area, the big room, there was another conference. It was for medical professionals on immunology, and they came in from all over the world, and a lot of them purchased, and we'll be taking them home to whatever country they came from. We do know that at least one of them is going to northern India. They started on Friday, at $55 or $35, all of the animals. So we had birds, many different kinds of birds, by the way, even a bluebird. We've got tadpoles, turtles, fish, and slugs. They were all awesome. We had a quorum though, because there was a little sticker shock on the animals. They were 55 and 35. So after the quorum, we moved them to 25, and then they started selling. And then there was a Mother's Day special for $15. And like Larry said, they sold really well. This is a program that is really, really needed. And the medical professionals that came in and talked to us kind of attested to that. You know, especially for them, they're spending all their time comforting other people. And it was great for them to have one, but it's important. It's really important. Okay. This is a picture of our bigger booth. On the right, that's us getting ready. Kelly's in the middle there. But you can see on the left, we had a lot of traffic. And when things got really busy, no one was taking pictures. So I think I have like 5 pictures from the whole show. All right. This is just an example of some more of the art. On the left is Terry's walking sticks. 2 of them were purchased, and people will be taking their art on a walk with them. Not many holiday pieces sold, so there was a lot of Christmas and some Halloween. But Kelly Stadelman, like Larry said, she sold 12 pieces total, and she offered, instead of 15% of her proceeds, she offered 20%, which is a little over $400. And she did that, she told me this morning, because she believes in the mission of keeping something alive, which I think is lovely. That's one of her pieces on the far right, on the top there. That's her maidenhead that sold, I think, on Saturday. Making connections. The pictures aren't what I'm going to talk about, but they're examples of Masa talking to our neighbor, some people learning about Nanny, and then this gentleman on the far left bottom made that walking, I don't even know what that's called, like a little cart. He moved it with his elbows. It was insane. People are incredibly talented. So more than 5 people asked to talk to Elise or asked about classes with Elise. Specifically, many more carvers and not took info about classes with the guild or the guild in general. Some have been carving for years. One gentleman for more than 50 years in our own backyard and didn't even know we existed. But now they do. One teacher brought a bunch of high school students, and 2 of them went up to Larry and asked if there was a student discount. And Larry, being who he is, said, "Of course there is, it's free," and gave them his contact information. And then Larry also made a brand new best friend. His name is Steve, and he carves woolly mammoth fossil tusks and walrus tusks, and lives in Parkdale. So I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of him as well. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about success, because yes, we're successful, Larry. Like Larry said, you know, we made what we put into it, which a lot of that investment will have already put in with the shelving and all of that stuff. But we made a difference by showing who we are and what we do. And people are going to remember us when they give that gift to their loved one, or when they put up their Christmas ornaments, or whenever they, you know, go to their normal park walk with their little walking stick. It's important, all of those things. Not everybody bought something. Some people took home information, and they'll be joining the club maybe. Roger took home this cat, like I said. Incidentally, he put it on hold, and 2 people tried to buy it after he already did. And here we are getting ready for Gathering a Guild 2023. Even if they didn't buy anything, they'll remember to visit us next year, right? Because people remember how you make them feel. And everybody in the booth, all the volunteers, all the people that were demonstrating, They all made everybody feel welcome. And there were people that were super, super young, and there were people that were really old. There are people that were, you know, in wheelchairs. No matter who you were welcome in the booth, and we're more than welcome to share information. So maybe some of them will be showing in the booth next year. That would be our biggest goal, right? Anyway, we'll be doing a post-mortem. Larry and I talked about it, and Kelly Stadelman as well, who's volunteered the entire weekend and helped with setup and breakdown and everything. So we may report out some of the things that we thought went well and some of the things that will change for next year. That's all I've got, guys.
Good job,
Thank you,
Ruth.
Bruce.
Thanks. Sorry if I went too long.
Oh, you want to just stop sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
There you go. I'm going to drop because I've got another meeting.
Okay, have fun. Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
So I really want to thank Roger Crooks. Roger is the unsung hero in a lot of this stuff. Gathering of the guilds is enormous opportunity for us. We plugged into an opportunity that existed, and I think it largely exists because of Roger's championship and effort over many years. So besides being president of the Turners Club and vice president of our club and an officer in the Gathering of the Guild LLC that runs this thing, it's just absolutely astounding. So we didn't have to create our own show. We didn't have to build our own traffic. We were able to plug into a traffic flow that was over 10,000 people. And they didn't all come our way. A lot of them went straight to the Potter stuff. But Roger, thank you. You're my unsung hero. So appreciate that. Just before I close the annual meeting, our finances are fine. We are in good shape. For those of you that are members, thank you. For those of you that are not members but are participating in our stuff, consider it. That would be a help. A few people last year used their RMDs from their investments to make a special contribution. And they did that via the Guild of Oregon Woodworkers because they are a 501c3. We are not yet a C3, but we will be a C3. So those funds will flow into us, and they'll flow into it nicely and legally. And that's a help to help us move forward. We need help in lots of dimensions besides the show support. We'll do Multnomah Days in the middle of August. We'll do Art in the Pearl again in Labor Day. So we got two right in our backyard coming up. But we also need volunteers and support. We need someone to help with monthly programs. We need someone to help with classes, productions, and promotion. We have great opportunities to do youth carving. We're really impressed with the Tri-City, Tri-Valley Carvers in Central California, who have had a soap carving program for 10 years and are willing to share their entire infrastructure with us, including their 3 half-inch dowel wooden tools, their kits, their jigs for making those things, and all of that. We need a librarian, and we need someone to help coordinate the Comfort Birds project going forward. So please feel guilty for a while and come help us. If you have any questions, email them away. Otherwise, I entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Roger, would you please? Oh.
I move that we
So moved.
move the meet, end this
Second.
meeting, part of the meeting.
Second. Okay, all those in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Let's move on to the Comfort Birds project. And I debated whether to call this Comfort Birds, Comfort Animals, Comfort Critters, Comfort Things, right? There are lots of legs to this dimension. And we're very lucky to have Don Faust with us. Don and I communicated on email maybe 6 weeks ago. He pointed me to Diane. Diane and I had some correspondence and communication. So those two are joining us from the Schenectady, New York greater area with a 3-hour time zone difference. So we'll have Don go through some of the slides that he's put together on a PDF, and Don will cue that up in just a minute and have you get started talking before I bring the slides up, just so I have a moment to do that. Don's father, Frank, was the originator of the Comfort Birds project and instigated this through Wood Carving Illustrated magazine. And we are sitting on
decades worth of experience. So our efforts to produce these, what we did in the last, I don't know, 10 weeks is really the benefit of all the stuff, all the work that's going on and the experience of them. But there's also people here, you know, from other clubs. And as we go through these conversations tonight, I'd like to encourage you to share your perspectives on the various parts of design, construction, finishing, and distribution of these things for the benefit, so we can kind of pool our collective wisdom together. So Don, I'm going to spotlight you. And let me just, as you're starting to talk, I will cue up your PowerPoint presentation, and then we will, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and your dad?
All right, thank you, Larry. Thank you for the invitation to speak to your club. Yeah, my father passed away last year, and he had spent, a good 40 years making comfort birds. And what I want to do tonight is to take you through the story of how he started with comfort birds and sort of the process that he used to make comfort birds. So queuing up the slide here. I called this the, can you take it back just a little more, Larry? Maybe it didn't show up. Yeah, I call this the tale of the comfort bird. And this is a picture of one of the comfort birds my father made that was in Wood Carving Illustrated. This is a cherry bird. And the unique thing about comfort birds is they fit in your hand and they're extremely smooth and soothing. It was interesting that I think it was Ruth that was talking about the medical profession that was there at the show, because a lot of people in hospitals, in chemotherapy, and places like that really relate to these comfort birds because they're almost like a rosary or worry beads. It's something that you can hold in your hand and just rub it, and you get a very calming effect to it. So if you can scroll into this next slide, this is a picture of my father. He made over 4,500 comfort birds during his lifetime. He gave many of them away, but he would also sell them at $10 a piece. And he raised $30,000 over his lifetime, and he gave it all to his church's mission efforts. With every comfort bird, he also gave this card that had a passage from the book of Matthew. And to just sort of summarize what this says is, if God cares for the birds of the air, you have nothing to worry about. You know, take comfort in this, that there's someone there for you. And so this comfort bird project kind of had three parts to it. One was it gave my father an outlet for his woodworking skills. It raised money, but it was also an evangelistic tool. So during his lifetime, he carved birds or made birds from over 300 different types of wood. And what really got this whole comfort bird project going was an article in the local paper. Frank grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, 3,000 people. The people at Wood Carving Illustrated saw this article And they did a 2011 article about comfort birds. And from that one article, hundreds of carvers started making comfort birds all across the United States and across the world. People in Australia, in South Africa, in England. It's just amazing what this one article did. It really resonated with people. And there are dozens of carving clubs across the US that are making these, and they're all doing the same thing, which is, how do I take this bird you can hold in your hand and use it to help other people? So just to give you a little background on my father, if we scroll a little bit further, woodworking was his hobby, but his occupation was a draftsman. And I noticed he would start with large projects when he was young, and slowly these projects got smaller and smaller. So he built the house that we grew up in, refinished it, did grandfather clocks, made horses, rocking horses and signs. But in about 1982, he turned his effort to carving birds. And these were from basswood. He would do the carving, the wood burning, the painting. He did ducks, cardinals, blue jays, hawks, all sorts of things like this. But as he got older, his hands started to give him a lot of problems. And so he moved from painting into doing just straight wood. And now he started carving ducks and just making them from hardwoods. Instead of doing them from bass, these were now made out of cherry. And again, he started making, a full-size Canadian goose, life-size ducks. Then these owls became a little smaller. The birds there in the middle and the bottom, they may be about 3 or 4 inches long. The wren. So again, started large, getting smaller and smaller. And finally, he moved into the comfort bird area. And again, working with wood, no painting, no wood burning. And even here, he kind of evolved. I tried to draw the designs that he started with, the early design, what I'm calling the retro design, and what I'm calling the current design. Now, this time the birds got a little bit larger, but the size changed, the shape changed, but two things were always constant in these designs. They were very symmetrical and they had a lot of curves to them. But not only was he a very good wood carver, but he was an excellent wood finisher. And it was one part to make the comfort bird, it was something else to put that, what my shop teacher in high school used to call that New York finish on it. Extremely smooth and that feel that you'd love to have. So as we move on to the next slide, typically Frank worked with 5 woods: cherry, oak, mahogany, maple, and walnut. This is where he started off, but he, like any artist, he wanted to experiment with other things, do different woods and so forth. And so as you go to the next slide, this is some of the effects that you see with different woods. You can go from extremely white in holly to extremely black with the Gabon ebony, or even something in between, like this black and white ebony. You could get different colors of birds, purple heart, a yellow from Alaskan yellow cedar, orange birds, reddish birds. So we kind of went through that phase. The next slide was showing the effect you could get with different grains. A lot of he always kind of liked it when the grain would come out and look like an eyeball in the side of a bird, or look like a wing. And you'd get the effect with a different type of effect with figuring or a curly type wood. Again, all these woods that he would do, he would never paint them, he would never stain them. He would just look at the natural wood. The design was always constant, but it was the wood that would change. And you really got to see the effect of different woods in the way the birds came out. And something that I've been experimenting with here is using laminated woods, where you take two different woods and put them together. Again, same design, different effect. I just threw in a picture here of this display unit. Larry and I were talking about how to show off birds when you're in sort of a show. This design came from, I think it came from a cupcake holder. A way to show a large number of birds in a very small space. The next slide shows what other people have done. These are birds that others have sent to me or to my father. Jim there in Texas, I don't know if you can see that little loop on the back of the bird's neck, but he would use birds as Christmas tree ornaments. Bill in Missouri, he would make birds and paint them or make them in different sizes. George, who's with us tonight, sort of changed the tail on the bird. Diane, who's also with us tonight, made a little nest for the birds to put in. Jerry from Iowa had sent these birds. He never finished them. They're in the raw wood. And Jim from Tennessee, I'll call these more of a primitive type of a bird. But everyone, all these different carvers, and there's an article there from a recent issue of Wood Carving Illustrated. They've got an article there on how carvers around the United States are making comfort birds. And they're interested in pictures that people produce from making comfort birds. At the end of the article, there's a email address that you can send your pictures to. But I think the thing that comes out of this is everyone puts their own style, their own twist on the comfort bird. So in the next slide, I wanted to kind of take you through the process that my father used for making comfort birds. His basic material for working was with a 2x2x12 turning block. These were, you could easily get these from wood suppliers on the internet, and he would lay out the birds so that he could get 3 birds out of the this 12x12-inch piece. Now, my father was a child of the Depression. He was born 3 days after the market crash in 1929. He hated to waste anything. So he figured out a way to squeeze out a third bird from this 12-inch block. If you kind of look at the design, I call it, as you go from left to right, it's head to tail, and then tail to head, where you're kind of throwing away the material above the tail. And so you put two tails together and could squeeze out the third bird from that. I'm going to talk in generalities here, but I put specifics on the slide if you're interested. You then take this and use a bandsaw to cut out these shapes, and you get a roughed out shape. And I'll also kind of put the names of the woods that are used here as illustrations. So here was what we call it's a cutout bird now. This is the next step, is where the real artistry comes in. And that's taking this roughed out shape and getting it into the shape of a bird. And what he came up with was what I would call power carving. And the key to this is taking a motor with a shaft on it and putting a sanding drum on the end of that. Now, originally, what my father did was he was using the motor off of a radial arm saw. And I sent Larry some videos showing how he was using this to carve out the birds. As he got older and realized he was making birds up until 10 days before he passed away at 91, his legs got tired standing there on this in front of the radial arm saw. So he designed a little table so they could sit down and do this sanding work. This was all hooked up to a shop vac and a cyclone. You can imagine that to take this roughened shape down into a smooth bird, you generate a tremendous amount of dust. And all this is being sucked out through a hole underneath that grinding wheel. So he would rough out a bird with 36 grit paper and then smooth it with 120 grit paper. Now, for the extremely hard woods like ebony and purple heart, things like that, I don't know if you can see it there under the word zebra wood, is a rotary rasp. That really chops away at the wood. So once you had a roughed out wood, you needed to do hand sanding. And he would go through 120 grit paper, 150 grit paper, 220, 320, and then finish it off with 1000 grit Scotch-Brite pad, and then would burn his initials in the bottom of it. Now, what I found is this is by far the slowest step in the whole process of making a comfort bird. Typically for me, it takes about 2 hours to go from start to finish. It's about 20 minutes to do the grinding on the wheel, but it's about an hour of hand sanding. And my fingers were getting torn up. So I ended up getting these silicone fingertips to put on my hands just to save my fingers from the sandpaper. Next slide. Now for finishing, what my father would do is to drill a 16th inch hole in the bottom of the bird and insert a needle that you use for yarn into the bottom of it. And the reason for doing this was it allowed him to put polyurethane on the bird, getting the top and the bottom done at the same time without leaving a seam on the bird. So he would use a brush to put on the polyurethane. He typically used 2 coats and use a 1,000 grit Scotch-Brite pad in between each coat. He was a firm believer in letting this dry thoroughly. He'd usually do it, he'd wait 2 days between each coat before putting this down. And you can see the birds there on the block of wood. Now, sometimes he would use a water-based paint, a water-based finish instead of, before he put down the polyurethane. He loved the polyurethane for its smoothness and shininess, but it had 2 problems. One problem was, and this next slide kind of brings that out, on the Bacote wood, it tended to blur together the grains when you had a light grain and a dark grain together. You can see how the oil-based on the left takes the white grain and turns it brown, whereas the water-based keeps that contrast together. So what you would do is to put down a coat of water-based and then put 2 coats of oil-based on top of that. Also, you can see there with the paddock, you get a different color bird depending on what finish you use. Now these came out of the same block of wood. One ends up being almost a deep red and the other one is an orange. Again, based on what is the first coat that you put down onto the wood. So the polyurethane is nice, but it does affect the wood. The other time he would use a water-based paint or water-based finish is on the woods that had a lot of oil in them. And you could tell if a wood had a lot of oil in it when you would do the wood burning for the initials on the bottom of the bird. You could see the oil actually ooze out of the bird. And if that was the case, an oil-based polyurethane, when you would put it down on that oily wood, would draw the oil out of the wood and into the polyurethane, and it took days and days to dry, if it ever dried. You didn't have that problem with the water-based material. So if you go to the next slide, he then did a final finishing. And here he would take a cloth and put pumice and oil, 3-in-1 oil, motor oil, it didn't much matter. You would rub that together on the cloth and then use that as the final smoothing on the finish, wipe that off, and then use a wax and polish that off to get to the final bird. The next slide shows kind of 3 distinctive things that you would ever see on my father's bird to know if they're his bird or somebody else's bird. The first is he always put on the bottom side of the bird, he'd put his initials, FF. You would see the hole for the finishing, and he would always put a tag on the bird with his name and the name of the bird on there. So when he passed away, being the only son, I ended up with all of his equipment and all of his designs. Now, I had helped him the last few years making birds, but I had never done all of the work. So since September, I've made 450 birds and have raised $2,000 for a charity in the area called the City Mission of Schenectady. Now, I never had a workshop, so I had to order a essentially like a garden shed, take electricity out to it, insulate it, drywall it, paint it, and that's now my working place. So one of the things that I've also done is put together a website. My father never had a website before, and I've put a lot of this information on that. So one of the projects that I'm working on right now is at the end of this month, it will be my 50th high school reunion. And back in 1998, my father's 50th reunion, he made a bird for everyone in his class. Now, his class was 40 people. My class is about 100 people. And so I've been busily working on making birds for all of my classmates. So I think that's everything. Is there another slide or not? No? Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
So Don, he always made 3 birds at a time, as I recall.
Yeah, he would start with, he would do them in lots of 3 because that's what he would purchase, these 12-inch sticks of wood, turning, and do 3 at a pop.
Yeah. So this is a time, Heidi, are you able to look at the questions?
Yes,
Take a look.
no questions yet.
No questions. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Don before we move on to Diane?
I visited Don about 1.5 years ago, and he had 3 beautiful glass china cabinets, just packed with gorgeous comfort birds, each one labeled. And then he had about 4 or 5 big boxes that, you know, you get paper in. They were all filled with comfort birds.
Wow. So this is Diane Balch talking. And Diane, I'm going to I'll cue up your slides, but maybe you could just talk about a bit about your Oregon experience as a way of introduction, and then how you what you're doing now with the club that you're in. Then I'll cue up your slides.
Well, somehow Larry got my name. We had a couple emails and then phone conversations. Ooh. So anyway, I've been a member of the Northeast Woodworkers Association for about 10 years now. And about 8 years ago, George Rutledge, who may still be on here, and Jackie Donahoe started doing the comfort birds. So we started out with paper pattern, and then we progressed to hard cardboard. And then I have a laser at home, so I lasered the patterns. One of our members had taken the original pattern was what I consider 100%, and he reduced it by 5% all the way down to 65%, so that we wound up with 9 different patterns. So depending on the hunk of wood we were using, we could make any size bird. So I laser cut sets of patterns, so because the paper patterns weren't holding up too well. Anyway, in our club, the Northeast Woodworkers Association, when we get a new carver in, the first thing we do is give them a comfort bird block, lend them a glove, a knife, thumb guard, and we sit one-on-one and we teach them a push cut and the pairing cut. and we do a comfort bird, teach them green. Usually in the first session, they get it all carved, and then we move on to sanding. Most of our birds are hand carved. Our group has made, in the past 8 years, given away about 600 birds. We don't sell them. We've only sold 3 times. We have sold them when we have our woodworkers show. It's a 2-day affair. The last 3 times we had it, we had a little store for the whole association. So we sold each time 30 comfort birds at $15 a whack. And then 6 years ago, George had the idea of having a raffle. So we sold raffle tickets for $1 a piece, gave away 2 birds a day. So it was 4 because it was a 2-day affair. And we wound up making over $200. So it was a big hit. With that, we bought more wood or sandpaper. The popular woods that we use mostly are bass wood, ash, poplar, catalpa, cherry, walnut, and box elder. Here's one picture of the birds from one view. And then the next picture is like a top view. And then the next picture is, these are some other birds. You'll see down on the bottom right corner, there's a flat bird that's a Christmas ornament. And what that is, you start out with a block, 2 inch by 2 inch block. And then when you cut out the bird, you have these shaped pieces. So we sanded some and put holes in it and ran a string. So you have a Christmas tree ornament. So you could see some little birds there. We even had Jackie even made some pins where she had made some small birds that had been cut in half down the length of the bird. So they're about 3/4 of an inch high by 1.25 inches, and then had a pin back. And so we sold those in the store. She made 6 of them, and we sold them for $8 or $10. They went fast. Now we do some power carving. Now that Tony, this is unfinished. This bird, one of our guys, Tony, was putting some wings on it. Further on one of the other slides towards the back, you'll see an eagle and a bird with metal feet that he made that even has wings and feathers on it. So Tony was getting bored with just regular comfort birds. So we do some power carving. Not much, using a Dremel or a Fordham, and that's if we use rosewood, hard maple, zebra wood. Oh, here we have a comfort fish. One of our ladies made a comfort fish, and the bird above there those are little black spots or from bugs. I don't remember what kind of wood that is. And here's one's butternut. Who knows what the other one is? Occasionally on the basswood, we might use some stain. And one of our ladies even painted a few blue and green, and they sold fast at the store. But we don't generally use paint. So for zebra wood, I don't know if you can see this. I don't know where my camera is. I don't know, there. Can you see my zebra wood bird? Can you see my zebra wood bird?
Yes, it's coming through.
All right. This was the second bird I made. I bought a hunk of wood down at Klingspor in Raleigh. And I had to power carve this. And I love the way it came out. So it's my favorite bird. It sits on my mantle. I wasn't going to give that one away. But one of our people in our woodworking club, but not in our carving group, he's a young guy. Jordan, he's made over 200 birds in the last 1.5 years, with about 180 different species. And he had them at our woodworking show. He made a metal cage so nobody would steal them. It looked like a lobster. The thing that get lobsters in, but he's got about 180 different species of wood. So those patterns, I made about 8 different sizes, and we cut the birds out on our bandsaw. Down in our shop, we have a 1/4-inch blade. One of our guys uses his own at home, and he uses an 1/8-inch blade on his bandsaw. Almost all the wood is donated, so we've got a pretty good sized woodworking club, so we never know what kind of wood we're going to be finding on our wood carving tables. Never know. So most of the birds are at the 85% or 100% size. And if we get smaller, pieces of wood, then we'll use a smaller chunk. This bird here is, whoops, can you back up? Okay, this is it's plywood, multi-grain. We get it from someplace in Maine, and it's very colorful. This has no finish on it. For sanding it, I sanded it up to 12,000 grit. And so I had to put no finish on it. It came out nice and shiny. I had to power carve it. That is really tough stuff. So let's see. There's Tony made this owl. There's another one of a front view, the next picture. So he made the eagle, he made the owl. You can move to another picture. There's his eagle, and there's the bird with feathers, but he made the little feet, put them on. He just finished the one with the feet last week. If you back up one, okay, Jack, one of our guys, Jack, he carves using a Swiss Army knife, just about everything. He's quite a good carver, so he made a bird with the head cocked to the right. He's done cardinals, he's done blue jays, but I don't have pictures of those because they were given away. Now for finish, for sanding, we use Abernat made by Merca. It's a mesh type sandpaper. It doesn't clog up. It's easy on the hands. We start with 80 grit, 120, 220, and 320. If you're doing stuff like rosewood or this plywood, I would go up to 12,000 using micro mesh. And then for a finish, we use Minwax poly, the oil-based poly or the acrylic water-based. My husband's favorite is True gunstock oil and bush oil. We also use Watco Danish oil, lacquer, shellac, boiled linseed oil, mineral oil, beeswax mixed with a little bit of boiled linseed oil. And what we do with most of our birds, we give them away to hospice, chemo, and dialysis patients, people who are grieving from the death of a family member. Out here, there's a pretty active wounded warrior group, so they have all kinds of get-togethers and competitions, and so we give them some of the birds to put in their little gift bags. We also have some homeless shelters for veterans, so we've given it to them, and battered women's shelter, and even to nursing home out in Indiana. I think that was George's. Oh, this is my comfort turtle. I just finished that yesterday. We had bought a book from Fox Publishing, I think it was, and it had 7 comfort creatures. So that was something different. It's not real smooth like the birds are, but, and this last thing here, my husband took one of my comfort birds and he does sand casting. So he sand casted, this is an aluminum mixed metal. It's quite heavy, but he sand casted a bird. So I guess that's about it. Yep, that covers my notes.
Yeah, that's, thank you, Diane. That's just true. 7 years goes by like lightning, I guess, huh?
Yeah,
In a flash. Diane shared the digital files for the scale templates that she did, and she gave us permission to do those. And Matt Gromes has a laser cutter, and I saw him at the show, and he has offered to cut some sets for us. And so we will make a couple sets of the scaled birds for the club, and have those available in 1/8" Baltic birch. So I think that will be a nice addition. And you can check them out or use them. If you want your own personal set, send me an email, and I will add you to the list and charge you whatever the costs are. There won't be very much, but we'll be thankful to Matt for doing that.
your friend that has the laser, if you can't get the Baltic birch, you can use he could laser cut heavy cardstock, or when you buy a pad of paper, the heavy cardboard that's on the back, that works well too. That could be lasered or cut with an X-Acto knife or scissors.
Oh, good.
It's
Okay.
better than just regular paper. Just
Thanks.
trace those patterns I gave you.
Yeah. Let's see. Heidi, you
We
wanna-
did have some things in the chat, Larry.
Go ahead.
So Todd said earlier, thank you, Don. That's a great story. Julie said, is it possible to get the link to the 2011 Woodcarving Illustrated article? And I found that, and I put it up in the chat. And then Brian from Tacoma said, where do you find the greatest need for the comfort birds? Retirement homes, cancer wards, etc. And Dawn replied, both are in need of comfort birds. My mother held a comfort bird in her hand when she underwent chemotherapy.
You can just go to the different facilities, bring a bird with you and ask them if that's something that they would like to give the patients there.
And
I
to add to
think-
that, my father gave 50 birds to his family physician, and he would give them out to his patients as they came in. And there was also, I think he gave, maybe a dozen birds to a local hospital, and they would have them there at the, in the reception area. And if somebody wanted one, they could pick them up there in a little basket. So.
Yeah, I think we'll hear more of those stories. I think Tom Rich has a story, and I think John Bozma has a story. And I have a story. I mean, my sense is you give one away, and what you find is that someone sees it and they ask for one, or they have a friend that wants one. And so I think it's from our club's perspective, I think my goal is to help individuals make their own and give their own away, to have the satisfaction of being in that link. And then as a club to also make a bunch, so that we can serve on a collective basis, that we can do good in a community project sense. And my guess is we'll find all kinds of needs. Heidi, I think we've gone through the questions. Let me just say that we have some more speakers I'd like to get through, and then we'll kind of go through some round robin kind of things. I've asked Roger to go next, and Roger is the one that proposed at our board that when we made the commitment to go to the gathering of the guild, that he said we ought to do comfort birds. And he had made some, had some experience. And so he was, again, the instigator of this idea within our club. So he's going to share a few things about the actual construction things. We also have some videos that we'll link to, and all the link that Heidi talked about we'll put on the post-meeting follow-up. So Roger, I'm going to,
Not like
see.
my iPhone.
I got to find it. Why don't you start talking and I'll find your
Okay.
iPhone.
So I took the shortcut version. I used a power carver, and Laurie asked me to just go over the tools that I use. So I use the Fordham. I like the, I don't like a foot pedal on my carvers because I guess I'm just not coordinated enough, but you set, nice thing about this, you set the speed that you want and it just goes. The roughing out handpiece is the standard Fordham one, and that's a fine grit one burr, and this is the where is it? There we go. This one really hogs out things really quickly. So my process is I cut the blanks on the bandsaw, and there's a short video on doing that with the patterns. I then use the rough one, the final one, the finer burr. And then for sanding, this is a really nice attachment to the Fordham. It's got on one side, it's got a solid back, and on the other side, it's flexible. And this is what I use for around the curves and the around the curve. Actually, I use this about 90% of the sanding I do. And these belts come into up to 1,000 grit, I think. And then once I'm done, then I use a buffing system, which if you're familiar with the BL system, it's a 3-wheel system. The wheel on the left is Tripoli, which is the most aggressive, and then the middle one is White Diamond. The wheel on the left is all linen with the White Diamond. The middle one is linen and cotton, and then the one on the right is Carnauba wax, and it's on a cotton wheel. And after the first, after the Tripoli, the wood really starts to get a nice shine. And then with the next 2 steps, it just really comes out nice and smooth. So, and the wood I had most handy was big leaf maple, which is very abundant around here, which is a little hard to carve by hand. So that's one reason I used the Fordham on that. So that's how I made most of mine. I also tried dyeing a couple. I think I had a blue one and a red one. And sort of interesting, the dye, I use an alcohol-based dye, and it's really dependent, how the dye soaks into the wood is really dependent on the sanding of it. So if you're not a good sander, the dye will not absorb into the wood very evenly. But if you can get everything sanded to 1,000 or so. The other Fordham attachment is this 2-inch sander. And for the bigger birds, I could use that, but it's 2 inches a little too big for some of the smaller birds. So that's making them with the Fordham.
How long did it take you to finish a bird?
To finish it?
Yeah,
After
start to finish. I mean, that means the finishing, the waxing system. How long does it, once the sanding is all done, how long does it take you to apply the finish?
15 minutes max, maybe 10 minutes. It goes really quick. The only thing that you have to be really careful of is to hang on to that bird, because they're spinning at 3,000 RPM or more. If you catch it at the wrong way, you'll send that bird flying, which you don't want to do.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. I've asked Tom Rich to go next because Tom did a really massive amount of work for us, and he uses the variation of the finishing system. But he's got something else, some other things to share. So Tom, I will find your pictures, highlight you, and ask you to go next.
Okay.
And then Bob, I'll ask you to go after Tom.
I started my woodworking wanting to make smoking pipes. And I found this book on how to create your own smoking pipes with simple tools. And I did this for a while, and it worked. But one of the appliances that it showed me to make, and maybe I can expand this a little bit. It's a drill mounted upside down on a block. And if it's mounted right and perfectly horizontal, then there's a table that's next to it, and that becomes you can use that as a drill press in a sense by moving wood into the bit. And also it can be used by chucking up a wheel and use it for polishing. The birds that I did, mostly I hand carved and then sanded, and then I sanded down to 600 grit, and then I used the Beal method using this tool, starting with Tripoli, going to aluminum oxide, and then carnauba wax. And that's how I would do the smoking pipes as well. I'd get a really good finish, finish of sanding, a good surface, I should say, using sanding, and then use the Tripoli and then aluminum oxide and then carnauba wax. We also, if we wanted color, we would use the alcohol-based dye, which is really a leather dye. You can get that at Tandy. And I use this method on all of my birds. Some of the harder woods, I did use my Dremel and some fairly harsh bits to hog away the wood and to do the shaping. And then I would always end up with hand sanding. Let's see, go back. This is this book is fairly inexpensive, and these are the plans on how to make the stand to put onto which you can put a drill. The nice thing about the drill is you have variable speed and you have reverse and forward, so you have rotation either way, and you have variable speed, and it's really nice for doing buffing and that sort of thing. And it would take me about the same as Roger, about 10 minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes to do one bird. One of the nice things about this is that you're not drilling a hole. The first tortoise I did, which actually I call my comfort turtle, I found out that all tortoises are turtles, but not all turtles are tortoises. So I used to have a turtle, so I call them comfort turtles. This is my system. Carnauba wax has a color to it. So when I did the Hollywood, some of the color in the wax of the Tripoli got into the wood. As finally it was sanded, there was still some grain that coloring got in. So I re-sanded the birds and got the Tripoli color out, and then just went right to aluminum oxide and then carnauba wax. And you can see the result of multiple different woods. This is my little turtle, my little comfort turtle. And they were all done without drilling holes, and it takes about 5 minutes, and it's really, really polished and smooth and comforting to hold these little guys. I think that's about all I had prepared.
And Tom, did you glaze the turtles? Was the
Glaze them?
coloration? How's the darker color in the tortoise in the shell?
Yes, the turtles were all made from basswood, and there's an antiquing method that I have used in basswood relief carving, where I will dab on and completely cover first using a shellac sealer. First shellac it, and then use a gel stain. It's a Minwax gel stain. And I used a cherry wood gel stain, and you just dab on this gel. It looks like grape jelly all over the bird. And then you just leave it on no more than 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then wipe it off. And then the gel, the stain stays in the crevices, and it kind of makes an antique-y look. It also does stain a little bit into the wood, the surface, the smooth surfaces. So I did that gel stain, and then I re-sanded, or I didn't sand. I used the Scotch-Brite to smooth the surface again, and then I did the aluminum oxide only, and then the carnauba wax. I'm not doing the Tripoli because I was afraid of getting that color mixed up with the color that's already on there.
Super, thanks. Any questions for Tom? Let's see. Jim Spitzer showed up. Jim is on vacation, so he's in Sedona area. And I'll talk about his experience and a really nice video that he designed, put together, but Roger shot. So Bob, I will go for you. Let me spotlight you. Hang on a minute. Why don't you go ahead, then I'll spotlight you as you're talking.
Hey, I had an opportunity to do something I haven't done. I've carved for about 20 or 30 years, but I tended to do one of a kind. And I found this project rather interesting in that I did a number of them. I think I ended up doing 8 of them. And actually each one of them turned out to be one of a kind again, because they sort of evolved. The first one took me probably about 3 hours to carve. By the time I was done doing the 10th one, I was down to about an hour and a half. But who's counting, right? I wanted to show you the evolution. This was the first tadpole I did. And rather simplistic, and it had this vein down the tail of it, which I ended up in later design getting rid of because it was too hard to sand and get polished. And let's see. And then these evolved into something that probably is a little farther away from a tadpole and more like a frog head with a tail. But I got intrigued by burning the eyes, and I wasn't going to put a glass eye or anything like that in there, and I wanted some texture. So what I ended up doing, these are a couple of others that have different personalities, but as you can see, each one of them is different. What I ended up doing is I would put the eye, I'd figure out where the eye was going to be and use one of these bits that I think they're called saber tooths, I'm not sure. And when you do it, obviously they're very aggressive and they leave lines. That worked for me because then I would go back with a small torch and just burn the eye, which would bring out the pattern in the depressed portion. And then from that, I would take a rotary tool, and then the charring only went down, I would say maybe a 64th or less of an inch. So it was easy to remove. And then I removed everything that I didn't want and ended up with the eye with sort of mascara around it. I enjoyed the project. I enjoyed doing numerous ones and seeing the evolution that occurred. And yeah, enjoyed it and thoroughly, thoroughly. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Bob. Let's see, do you want to stop sharing? It will be okay. There we go. Tom Sipe also took up the challenge of, he's not able to be here tonight. Tom carved a slug, and he used greenwood, whacked it out with an axe and used big knives, and just basically did everything from greenwood on down. I forgot what he used. I think he used alder, but we have pictures in the gathering of the guilds that he did. Then he did some other variations with turtles, and he actually demoed then the turtle process there. Jim Spitzer was the first one that took up Roger's challenge and used sanding, and he developed a really nice video. Roger shot the video, but Jim staged it. He ended up carving, bandsawing out 2 at a time, tail to tail. And that allowed him to have a handle on one side, but in a sense, but he could also clamp in the middle where the 2 tails were joined together. It represented a clamping surface. And then he used belts off of a belt sander, 1 inch, maybe ½ inch or 3/4 inch wide belts, and then cut them, and then basically used like shoe polish bands, straps, and he was able to fairly aggressively with coarse grit knock off a lot of the stuff, and then use finer and finer, and then eventually hand sanded it. And he developed a video that that shows this whole process, and I will link that to you and I encourage you to look at it. Tom Sipe also did a similar thing with sanding. He used a Rockler, I'm not sure what they call it. I would call it a bow sander. It's about 8 inch wide with a bow that represents kind of a soft, pliable surface like Roger showed on the Fordham sander. And I was able to use that for a lot of the sanding a lot of the curves. We had some of the question. One of the questions was how long does it take? And some of you are responding like 2 hours. And so some of the beginning woodworkers started using bandsaws, and they did the bandsawing. So Marty and Karen Meadows did a lot of the bandsawing and just did the bandsawing. And that basically set the stage for then doing the next stage for roughing out and doing finer finishing. Sue Stanford is not able to join us tonight, but she jumped in, and we set her up with a Dremel with a flexible shaft. She lives on a houseboat on the Willamette River in Portland, so couldn't sand or do the work inside. So she just parked outside when it wasn't raining with a small Husky shop vac and the Atmosphere as a dust collection system, and a Dremel with two different bits, their coarse and their fine, and did all the roughing and fine forming of that. And then Karen Kettler, bless her heart, picked up about 30 of these. Well, she also did a whole bunch of work using my Fordham and a micromotor system with the same 2 bits. And then she sanded all of them. She was on vacation in her spare time, took some sandpaper and a shoebox full of birds, and came back 2 weeks later and had them all finally finished to 400 grit. And then Tom Rich then put them on his deal system and did the finishing. So it was quite an eclectic collection. I did a few myself out of holly and ebony, and I never worked with ebony with a power bits, and that turned out to be quite a nice thing. So then we went to the show, and then here we are. So the big question for us going forward is how do we organize ourselves? We need some help for I think 2 different kinds of help. We need 3 different kinds. I'd love to find someone that would basically be the external go-between to help find and plug into the needs, whether it's our local children's hospital or nursing homes or vets or friends, but sort of that external community relationship kind of thing. And then another, like a co-leader to help kind of put some of these things to make them. There's a fair amount of steps in keeping track of all of that. Wood is not the issue. Bandsawing is not the issue. You know, the issues are sort of the middle sides of these things. The ones we did were not hand carved. And I was really impressed with Diane Ball saying, I think at one point she said about 95% of her things were hand carved. So that's a whole different, animal. We'd like to put some workshops together for people that have never done this and go from there. And John Bozma, I see that you're here. We chatted during the gathering in the guilds, and you had some experience. Are you willing to share a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I got into carving birds, I suppose, during the beginning of COVID, because I had friends, not that had COVID necessarily, but, have other problems that were either emotional problems or, death of a relative or things like that. And so I was making them and just giving them away to people, and that worked out really well. And then I moved to Willamette View, which is a retirement community in Milwaukee next to Portland. And they had a craft fair. And so I took some birds to the craft fair, and they were gone within the first hour. I couldn't believe it. I've never sold anything before like that. So it was kind of a first. And one of the people that bought one of them was there's a counselor, kind of a therapist on site here. And she bought one for her mother who has Alzheimer's. And apparently it just instantly calms her mother down when she gets agitated, which happens very frequently. So I thought, we've got a memory unit right here. So I offered them to make them a dozen, and they said yes. So I made a dozen birds and gave them to the memory unit, and they apparently are having a very good experience with them. My process is actually pretty similar to Roger's. I started carving them with a knife, but I really wanted them to be smooth, and I didn't want to sand them by hand all those hours that people are talking about. So I used a Fordham, and well, first of all, I bandsaw them, and then I rough them up more on a 6-inch belt sander, which I don't know if you could see my hands, but I've got all kinds of wounds on them from the belt sander, so I'm switching over now to a spindle sander, which is a much safer thing. And then I finish them with my Fordham with, I've got some of those little drum sanders where you put on sandpaper, and stick a thing down the middle. And then I've got about 4 of those, so I can go through the grits with that. And that works really well for me with no hand sanding at all. And I haven't been using my Beal system, but I think I'm going to start. That sounds like a really good idea. But I've had the same experience with the rouge turning the wood red, and that's why I haven't been using it. But I think if somebody suggested just skipping the rouge and going straight to the white, I think I'll do that. One of the things I enjoy doing with these birds is making little dioramas. I made a couple of them with open beaks. And so at Thanksgiving, I set those up with in facing a flock of birds and a couple of other little animals that I had carved. And, that was my, the 2 birds were singing to the forest animals was the general idea. And I sent that out as a Thanksgiving greeting. So, and sometimes I make little mushrooms to go with them. To me, it's all whimsical and humorous as well as comfort, smooth and sensual, but also whimsical and humorous. So.
And John, are you making the Frank Faust design basically, or do you?
It's pretty much like that, although I varied it a little bit. I have some that look more like if you ever seen a penguin swimming underwater, they're kind of bullet shaped with a pointed end, both ends. Some of them are like that. Some of them are, well, it's basically that. The head has, in most cases, my neck has a little less, the back of the neck has a little less definition. It's more smooth. And then I made about 4 or 5 different kinds of tails, you know, swallow tails and skinny ones and ones pointing up, and, you know, just whatever strikes my fancy. That's part of the whimsical thing. You know, they're not birds, actually. They're not intended to look like real birds. It's more like caricatures of birds.
Yeah, I will say for Jim Spitzer, his preference, I would say his strong preference are swallowtails.
Mhm.
That he likes those. And I don't know that we have enough evidence to know what people bought, and I'm not sure that's a meaningful experiment, but that was his personal preference.
One thing I ran into with the memory unit is they didn't especially want things with points on them, and, you know, or things that might break off. So, and another constraint they had was they were worried that, you know, there's about 20 or I don't know, 15 people in the memory unit here, and I gave them I don't know, roughly 15 birds. And my thought was they give one to everybody, but their thought was they can't do that because the birds will all disappear into people's rooms and then they won't remember where they are and they'll be gone. So instead they, you know, they monitor the use of them. You know, they hand them to people and then they get them back.
I will share a personal experience that there's a grandchild element to this. We have a dear friend that lives in Iowa whose husband developed dementia, he had to go to a memory care unit, and she was in bad shape, but she just didn't expect that so quickly. And so I mailed her 2 comfort birds that I had made early on in the process. She sent a picture back that we'll share of a 5-year-old granddaughter that had been visiting, and she noticed the girl was walking around with something in her hands and she couldn't quite figure out what she had gotten into. So she said, come over here. And she opened them up and there were the birds. There was a pair of birds, and she wouldn't let those things go. I mean, and then it's kind of like not quite a dollhouse thing, but it was one of those, anyway, she started arranging them and they were very special for them. Tom Sipe, I noticed you just joined, so I just out of the corner of my eye, are you willing and able to share? You don't have to, I don't want to put you on the spot if you're just out of breath and walking in, but if you are able, I will. If not, I will pass. You're muted though.
Yes, I did catch a little bit of what you said. I did actually hand carve most of the ones that I did. I power carved the fish I did, and one of the birds, but mostly I did them hand carved, especially after bandsawing. The turtles were, I used Jim Spitzer's idea of putting things together. So I had 2 of them together, holding on to one and then carving with the other. But after I got good enough at it that I could do a turtle in a little less than an hour. So that is with using your good knife, Larry.
The gild rake, the
Using
gild
some
rake
of my
good knife,
original
right?
knives.
The gild rake good
Knife
knife.
was excellent knife. So that took about a little less than an hour for each one, including the sanding. I also had the same problem with the Tripoli, leaving the color on it. So I also omitted that step and went straight to the white diamond polish. So
What woods did you
it
use?
was a great experience. I enjoyed doing it. As the other Tom said, yes, they're all alike, except they're all different. A lot of times that the wood decides that it doesn't want to go that way. And so you get to have a unique piece. So, of course, I started out with subjects like a slug and a tropical fish and a turtle. So non-traditional.
Hey, Tom, what woods
But
did
that's
you
about
use?
it.
Which
I
woods
used
did
alder.
you just
Yeah,
muted yourself?
which woods?
Yeah.
I used, alder for my, because I have an alder trees about, so I was able to harvest the alder, and that was for the green wood for the slugs. That was very simple. And the thing that took a lot of time with the alder is having green wood meant that I had to leave it be for a week or so between finishing carving it and polishing it. because the green wood would just kind of gum up. I eventually, with the last one I did, I put it in the oven at 175 degrees for a couple hours, and that dried it out very nicely, didn't crack. So that's what I'll do in the future, getting the green wood. As long as you don't have any knots or any heartwood in it, you know, you can use that as a makeshift kiln. So that worked out. I used walnut for the tropical fish, and I used butternut for the turtles.
Thanks. And Jiggy, I'll say Jiggy, but that's your name on your screen. So Diane identified you as the father of all this in your area. Would you share with us what you would like?
Well, sure. My background is I was trained as a designer and furniture maker, and I had a 40+.
So your connection is, you just muted yourself. You're just muted, I think. Can anybody else hear him?
I realized that there was more to the little birds that Jackie.
George, you're cutting out.
George, you must have a weak connection because your audio is basically non-existent.
Pardon?
Your audio is cutting out so badly, it's basically non-existent. So,
Oh, so,
we
sorry
didn't.
about that. I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah, Diane,
I
did
do
you
have
hear
one
what he?
thing
I couldn't hear what he said.
Yeah,
I
See,
know I'm muted. It doesn't.
If-
I guess it's not coming through.
If you turn off your video, we're more likely to be able to hear your audio.
Okay, well, we'll try that. But I did have something I wanted to just show you for starters. But
so
and
now
this
it's
is,
okay. Now it's okay. So give it a quick
okay.
try.
So anyway, I have a bird that Frank Faust sent me, and back in 2015, I contacted him to ask for a bird, and he refused to sell one. He said he would trade. So
You're cutting out again, George.
and I don't know if you can see it, but he made the box out of a what appears to be a Frosted Flakes cereal box, which I just thought was very, very charming, along with this beautiful bird that he sent me in Loganberry. I don't know if you can see that. So I would just also just add that it's been one of the greatest experiences in terms of being able to put the skills that I was born with to use to provide some help and benefit for just other people on a very personal level. And you know, you just can't beat carving with friends. And that's about all I would add to that. So yeah, that's about it. One other thing
Great.
that I did want to interject though, maybe, is that it doesn't have to be power or hand. You can actually do some rough shaping with sanding equipment and then finish with carving tools. And one of the things I like to do is leave some texture from tool marks. And I've actually been told that people on the spectrum really appreciate texture rather than just completely smooth surfaces. So that's another thing your members might want to consider. And I'll let someone else go.
Thank you. Thank you. That was the experience too. We had so much variety. We let people pick. And it's really surprising. I mean, Roger made a really unique red bird with kind of a pedestal on it with a very long beak. It looked like a crow on steroids with the beak, with the body of a hummingbird. And, you know, it got taken. And the one that was dyed blue. And Ruth, bless her heart, had this comment that, you know, there's a home for every one of those things. You just don't know where it will be. And with that confidence, just do it. Tom Rich, when he was finishing, found some of the early sanding wasn't quite done. Some of the carving wasn't quite well done. And he said, you know, these are all unique. We just left them alone and polished them up, and they got taken. Enough of them got taken that they each had their own home. I want to give everybody the opportunity to either ask a question or make a comment, share about what you've done or hope to do. Anybody hold their hands up or shout, especially from other clubs?
Don, it's Diane. I sure learned a lot about the finish with the acrylic and the poly. Thank you for sharing that. We're
Yeah.
going to make some changes in our club.
Well, it's
No problem.
just another way of doing it, right? I mean, the nice thing about the waxing system is that it goes so fast. You don't have to wait for a couple days. What I will say is that we didn't know how to tag these things at the show. We put little rubber bands and small tags around them. And what we noticed is that after a couple days, some of the rubber bands were tied too tight, and it actually marred into the wax. The finish wasn't that hard, and then we buffed it out again. Some we could buff out by hands. A few I took home in order to buff them out. So how you actually go to the end game turned out to be an interesting little wrinkle that we hadn't thought about.
We have found that if with the swallowtail, it's easy just to take a little tag with the string and tie it. As long as it's a swallowtail, it won't come off.
Yeah.
Or if it's has a nice defined neck like Frank's have, you can tie it around the neck.
Yeah. And the challenge is when they're all smooth bodies, then that becomes a different issue. Anybody else?
I was just going to make the comment. My father had noticed that his best salespeople were his customers. As you were saying, Larry, somebody would get one of these birds and tell somebody else and tell somebody else. As I was telling Larry, there's a little town out in Wisconsin that my father must have sent 200 birds to in 10 different shipments. And it all came from one person telling another person, and it just spiraled from there. The other comment was, I would imagine 80% of the people that contacted him were women, not men. The men that were contacted wanted to do the carving, but the women were interested in purchasing birds. And to sort of Diane's comment, the women liked the smaller bird because they would have a smaller hand. And so I've started to switch from the larger size bird back to the original bird, just because that's what quote customers are looking for.
And I will encourage, when I send out the email, you'll get a lot of links. One of them will be to the 75-minute interview that was just informal with Don. And he and George Jiggy, to share your comment about the cereal box. It really played, and Don talks about that. His dad never threw anything away. He made his own boxes. And he folded the inside of a cereal box in order to make a shipping box. And then when people open up, that's what they saw. No, you don't have to go buy them. I think it's getting close to be witching hour. I don't want to close this prematurely, but I would like to give anybody else a chance to share or talk, particularly if you have some experience, good or bad, on either technique or whatever. Diane, I think you said that you found that exotic woods, highly figured woods, tend to be more popular than plain woods. Do I remember that accurately?
Well, we don't make that many highly figured because a lot of them need to be power carved. And there's only a couple individuals that will power carve, but certainly ones that aren't basswood that have other color, than basswood certainly is more people like better.
Yeah. So Al Plash is here. Al, I'll just maybe put you on the spot a little bit, but Al's in Ventura, California, is a good friend now. That is a result of Zoom and being able to connect. Your club does otters, right? Your otter project seems to have a lot of characteristics of comfort things. Does it tend to work in that category, or is that just a different thing?
I'm about the only one I know that have sanded it down to 600 and made it really smooth. But that's something to explore. Thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate that. I don't have one up here to show you.
Yeah, but Al shared his patterns with us. This is their beginning project. It's a kind of a gently sloping, curved critter that is a grain training exercise for beginners, but it sure feels and looks like a comfort creature to me.
Sure can be.
Yeah. And Don, you had sent me earlier on the name of a guy who I can't remember, who's in Rhode Island or Massachusetts, that makes comfort angels, comfort crosses.
Yes, I think he's in New York City.
Yeah.
He's again, a cross that you can hold into your hand, and again, it's very smooth, but it's also a very plain design. It's quite easy to make.
I don't know what worry stones are. I know the word, I know the thing about that, but if anybody has any cultural historic background on where that fits in the grand scheme of things, because there's yet another, there's some tactile, medical, mental, psychological kind of things going on that might inform us in terms of how to make appropriate things. We are Westerners. I would say most of us are probably of European origin, but you wonder what other diverse cultures might want and experience, whether from Central South America or from Asia or from indigenous peoples in the United States. It's sort of like, how does all that work? So I think there's an opportunity for some interesting conversations. Yeah,
Hey,
Clark.
Larry.
Yeah.
My grandpa, he was a woodworker and a rock hound, and he made worry stones. They were maybe silver dollar sized, $half sized, and just had a nice smooth divot in it. And I was explaining them to my sons earlier today. It's kind of the old time fidget. The kids nowadays, they have a bunch of different options for fidgets that they hold on to and constantly play with. And that was, the idea was that you would rub the stone when you were worried, but it was really just, if you think about it, it was an old timey fidget that you just have in your pocket or you keep in your hand, and just rub that smooth spot on that stone. He never, he did a lot of woodworking. He never really got into carving, but I bet he would have enjoyed making these comfort critters.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, well, I think we'll pull the plug. We'll call it quits for tonight. This is going to be the last meeting until September in the monthly format. We'll be doing some other things locally. We need to take a bit of a break, but there's an opportunity to do some sharpening, I hope. There's an opportunity to do some soap carving, I hope. I really do appreciate the sharing with the Pleasanton Tri-Valley carvers to share their experience.
we were asked to provide a wood carving demonstration to a Cub Scout pack, which had both boys and girls in it. And I didn't have time to recruit anybody, so I reluctantly did it myself, and that was a life-changing experience. They told me there would be 15 scouts and 15 parents in a room. I had 2 hours, and I had never seen the room. I never saw the technology. Thankfully, only 6 showed up. Six scouts and 6 parents, but it was a great experience. And we did some soap carving. We did some dog whittling. Some of the older scouts had their knives. I had made some wooden knives, but we used the Janet Bolliard book called A Complete Book of Soap Carving. And she was our designated speaker a year ago. She was living in Mesa, Arizona. Jerry Boone knew her, and she was slated to speak to us, but she got COVID the month before. So she had to back out, and her recovery was long, so we never had her back. But when I heard about and connected with the California Club, the guy that was organizing it said he took it over from Janet Bolliard, that before she wrote her book, she had created the program in Pleasanton and had created the whole process, and he just took it over. So there's already a turnkey book for that. And the beauty of a soap, obviously, is it's grainless. You don't have to deal with some of the things that we deal with wood, and it tends to be safer. So I'm thinking about, as a club, whether we can do some hands-on kids things, particularly at the Multnomah Fair, Multnomah Street Days, for those of you that are here in the Portland area. Yeah, and Diane's holding up the Wood Carving Illustrated book that shows the other eight ways to make animals. So we'll put links out to all of that, but there's a lot of ways to go with this, so we'll have fun. Anyway, thank you all for joining, and stay tuned for the links. And I encourage you to, if you find this in your heart, to jump in and either help teach, help make, help coordinate, help organize, help find sockets, or just do one for yourself and your loved one. Do that, but also let me know. Thanks to the speakers. Thanks for everybody, and look forward to seeing you sometime soon. Diane, Don, thank you very much for staying up late. It's getting close to midnight in New York.
It's midnight.
It's midnight. Yes, it is now midnight. So
Well, actually, it's after midnight, so it's
we will
the next
call it
day.
good. So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your generosity. We really
welcome.
appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks all.
Thank you.